1977, Bridges opened its doors in the greater Nashua community as the first rape crisis center in the state of New Hampshire. And we serve 14 towns in southern New Hampshire. One of our primary partners in the community are local police departments, and Nashua is among the busiest of those police departments.
My name is Lieutenant Pete Urban. I'm with the Nashua Police Department. I'm also on the board of directors of Bridges. The Nashua Police Department responds to over 2,000 domestic-related calls for service a year, of which we make approximately 600 arrests. That's an average of almost 2 arrests a day for domestic violence-related offenses.
We have a program that we use that's called the Lethality Assessment Program, and local police departments will arrive on scene at homes where there's domestic violence and conduct the lethality assessment, which is essentially questions that they ask survivors to determine how lethal their situation is. And they will get a Bridges advocate on the phone right there in the moment to talk to a survivor on the scene to help them be safe that night and to provide follow-up services in the days to come.
In any domestic case where we identify a potential victim of domestic violence, the Nashua Police Department does provide Bridges information to bridge the gap between the police and services for the victim and their family.
We're really grateful to the bravery of many survivors. We're introducing Jackie, who's going to share the story and experience of her family and her mother.
She was the type of mom, and I think she only saw us 2 days a week. She always wanted to make sure that we were doing fun stuff. Take us sledding on the weekends. She loved to read, so we'd go to Barnes & Noble together, and we'd get a little treat at the cafe, and we'd read books together. She just always liked to make sure that we seemed happy and doing stuff. I feel like most people would see her and not think this woman's in an abusive relationship, because to somebody who knew her and didn't know the relationship dynamics that she was in, she was very strong-willed, she was very independent. She was the type of person who, grit's probably a good word, she'd been through a lot of heavy stuff in her life, but she just kept pushing forward and she wanted better for herself and for her kids. She wanted to make sure that other people were happy. I didn't see any physical abuse. I never saw physical abuse. I mean, I would see her with bruises sometimes. She was very clumsy, and it was really hard to tell. She would say, "Oh, I fell." And I'd be like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. I've seen her fall, get bruised before." So, it really honestly could have been a fall. I never saw him physically abusive. The running joke was "Oh, Al could never hurt a fly. He could never, he's the nicest person in the whole world. He could never hurt anybody."
Domestic violence in a relationship starts off slowly. They're usually very warm and kind in the beginning, and then over time erode away at your self-esteem and control finances, belittle the person, call them names, control who they see and when they see them. So they'll alienate them from friends and family. They'll control what they wear, transportation, anything that's going to provide them with any kind of independence. All of those things are very serious indicators of domestic violence. It's not always the physical abuse.
He would show up at her door at work whenever she was either getting out of work or going out for lunch, because he wanted to know where she was and where she was going, and could only really trust her if she was in his presence. He would threaten to kill himself if she were to leave when they would argue sometimes. She couldn't go anywhere with her kids by herself. And again, I always thought, why are you letting him win? I blamed it on her. And now I can look back and think, wow, she was so controlled by him that she felt like she had to ask permission to be alone with her children on the 2 days a week that she gets to see them.
It's hard for family and friends to recognize the signs. And so we're constantly trying to educate people to say, yeah, those are signs. And just because there isn't physical abuse doesn't mean that it's not dangerous. It doesn't mean that it's not lethal.
But they were walking home from the holiday stroll, and by the time they got to the bridge, for whatever reason, he stabbed my mom. I think it was 26 times all over the body, and then left her there to bleed out on the sidewalk in the snow. And I just sort of sat there in shock. But one of my initial thoughts was, of course he did. Of course he killed her. Which seemed so odd to say when, like, I had no idea that he was capable of that until he did it. And then I realized, oh yeah, everything started to sort of piece together of course you were capable of that. All the signs were there. And I just didn't acknowledge them as her child. I think there were she was so isolated at that point, there weren't enough people who knew the dynamic. So it flew under the radar. Everybody was sort of at arm's length. She was the fun coworker. She was the fun friend. People weren't coming over to the house and like hanging out with them regularly.
In the state of New Hampshire, we conduct what's called a domestic violence fatality review, in which a committee looks at all homicides in the state of New Hampshire related to domestic violence. When we look at the homicides in our community in Greater Nashua, the only common theme is that folks who were killed were not receiving Bridges services. And that only strengthens our resolve that if we can get the word out, if we can educate, if we can reach out to people and reach more people and spread the word, that we can actually save lives.
I got involved with Bridges largely because I feel like if my mom had known that those were signs earlier on in the relationship, maybe she would have gotten herself out. If she had known that there were resources that she could use, maybe she would have ended up alive. I want to make sure that my kids grow up in a healthy dynamic. My mother always told me that she was proud of me for any little accomplishment. She wanted us to know that she was proud of us. So I'm proud of myself, and I think that she would be happy to hear me say that. And I think that she's proud of me too. So she would have been a really good grandma if she had been given a chance to be here for that. So.